So I'm sitting alone in my car. It's a warm summer night. And I've probably been staring at my phone for like a little bit too long. The number that I've tapped into the screen is for the suicide hotline. There's just one problem. I can't bring myself to call. Because I'm a man, not some princess. I shouldn't need to be rescued. So instead, an ex-girlfriend who owes me nothing is frantically calling up my friends, crying while she tries to save my life. She really shouldn't have to be a part of this story, but because she loves me, she is. So I want you to keep her in mind. We're going to come back to her. Maybe ironically at this stage in my life, I'm a success. I work with Fortune 500 brands. I deliver on project work with staggering, massive price tags with too many zeros. And every single day for 2.5 years, I wake up feeling numb and empty and alone. Like I just can't stop drowning. And I'm here today to tell you that the rate of male suicide is skyrocketing. It's higher than it's ever been. I survived, I suppose, and what I learned might save the life of someone that you know. And in order to do that, we're going to take an unlikely journey where the first stop is baby aspirin. So by show of hands, who here has heard of the fact that if you have a baby aspirin, it can reduce your risk of having a stroke? A lot of hands. And I want you to keep those hands up if you know exactly what % difference that baby aspirin actually makes. Okay, uncomfortable laughter, looks of confusion. That's pretty much where I was at with it as well. So I started doing the research. And for this particular study, what they found was if you give people an aspirin within 48 hours of them having symptoms of ischemic stroke, one of the most common types of stroke, for every 100 people that participate, one of them will be able to raise their hands and say, hey, that aspirin, it saved my life. And they won't have to go to the hospital, they won't have complications, they won't even have a follow-up stroke. And so even though that aspirin is arguably like 1% effective, I'm also going to argue that the reason why so many of you knew about that connection between aspirin and stroke is because that aspirin is a minor miracle. It's a simple solution. Many of us have access to it. And the end result, when it works, is lives get saved and changed. So what if there was an aspirin, but for suicide? So in 2019, the CDC estimated that there were 1.38 million suicide attempts in the United States alone for just that year. So that 1% would go a long way. But if we can accomplish what I think we can accomplish tonight, and y'all seem like a pretty smart bunch, that seems pretty likely to me, then the difference won't be 1%. It'll be 60 times that. But since suicide starts in the mind, it's not really a pill that we need to swallow. It's more of a thought, an idea, and one that directly counteracts another one. And one place to begin to look is what thoughts, then, are causing men to kill themselves. And if the research is to be believed, it all points to one very specific kind of stubborn thought, and that's, as a man, I need to blank. As a man, I need to be strong, I need to keep my word, I need to have a magnificent mustache, and I'm a little bit upset that I can't grow one. And as a man, I need to protect the people that I love. And that last one especially is a piece of masculinity that I love that exists. I'm proud of that. But masculinity is more than just 4 ideas kind of mushed together. It's like this big, messy world of ideas that we hold together with like twine and glue and spit, right? It's really complicated. But to begin to understand what we're working with, we need to also unpack that. So what comes to mind for you when you hear the word masculine? And I want you to shout out your answers. Proud, strong, good, yes. Stoic is a good one. Brave leader. Awesome. I'm looking for one more. Protector. Good. So basically, what you've given me is Batman, right? Like, and maybe he has a beard too. And this is perfect, right? This is an example of our cultural givens. This is what we were raised to believe that a proper man should be. And I don't know about you, but I was raised to believe that as a man, crying was kind of the ultimate act of shame. I also grew up believing as a corollary to that like emotions were just as bad. I understood that emotions were appropriate for like two demographics, the first of which was like schoolgirls, and then and the second one was womenfolk, which I was neither of those things, so I shouldn't have feelings, and I began to push those away. But the thing is, the thing that they never really tell you about that is how after a lifetime of practice, maybe one day eventually you succeed. And then you get to wish that you really hadn't. Because you'll have also succeeded at pushing away the thing that makes you human. What they don't tell you about that is while you're pushing away crying, you also kind of begin to suppress the other emotions in your life, the happiness, the joy, and then one day you wake up and you realize your entire life has been about going through the motions. And it doesn't matter what you're doing. Whether you're riding a roller coaster or at a theme park or at a wedding, you can't feel anything, no matter how much you try. And while you're distracted with that thought, then one day maybe something really bad happens, something that you can't push away. And your emotions are screaming. It breaks you. Those emotions, they want to come out, but they can't because you've gotten too good at this, at just pushing them down. And so instead, reality just starts to hurt. It hurts and it feels empty at the same time, and you don't know how to make that stop. So as a man, you endure. You grit your teeth, you push through it because that's what you're supposed to do. So I think what I'd like to do is kind of create a little bit of levity here and just collective breath out if you've been holding it. I'm so grateful and lucky to have that chapter in my life over and done with. I think looking back, one of the scariest parts for me was seeing how at some point I got to a place where suicide just kind of made logical sense. Instead of all the pain that I was experiencing, I could just have no pain. There was no drama to it. And that for me was the most frightening part. What I'm aiming to accomplish here today is to help people who are in that space find their way home, because I know how dark it can get. And in order to do that, we need to turn to the research. So what does the research have to say about what's happening here? If we take a look, it all seems to boil down to actually something really simple, something easy to address, at least on paper. And it looks like this. It's a cycle with only 2 steps to it. And the first is a hard life event. And for a lot of guys, it might be divorce, or losing a home, losing a job, going through a breakup, or losing a family member, or their physical health. Just something that hits us hard enough that we're forced to feel something, even if we're busy trying to push that away. And that very naturally leads us to a place of suppression. As a man, I shouldn't have feelings, so stuff them down. But if you're anything like me, then that also comes with this constellation of other behaviors. So it might look like you also stop sleeping. You start eating poorly, you stop working out, you self-isolate, you get into more fights, maybe you start drinking some more. And the research is beginning to show that when you take on that kind of behavior, especially not asking for help, right? And that's a really commonplace one. Like, I don't know about you, but my personal game plan when I'm hurting is to notice the pain first and then ignore it really, 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 really hard and hope that eventually at some point it goes away. But when you do that, research shows that you also become more likely to fall ill or get injured, or die as a complication. And if it doesn't happen to us, then it's liable to happen to someone that we know, that we care about, another male family member, a male friend. And so you can see just how insidious this cycle is. We've just immediately gone back to the first stage, which draws us back into stage 2. And research out of Fordham University is showing that for men who reject things like crying or being moody or having emotions at all, we're up to 2.5 times, roughly 2.5 times, more likely to die by suicide, which is a pretty grim statistic. But for me, it kind of also represents the way forward. That's the ground that we have to gain. This is a clear bridge between emotional suppression and men killing themselves, and we're going to come back to that. The thing that hurts the most, though, for me to know as a human is that it's not just affecting grown men, males between the ages of 10 and 24. This is the second leading cause of death for them. I'm going to say that again because it bears repeating. And with statistics, it can be easy to kind of get lost in the numbers. There's no impact in that. So instead, I want you to imagine that there is a 10-year-old boy. And he's on the playground, and he's got his friends running around screaming around him, but he's not participating because today is the day that he's chosen to die. And if that hits you, if what you feel right now is sadness and grief and loss or shock, anger, then know that that's the appropriate response because that should have never been allowed to happen. And it can be so easy to take a look at this situation and ask ourselves, who am I? Who am I in the face of this? 1.38 million suicide attempts every single year. What difference could I possibly make? But that, in my opinion, leaves room for the world's greatest answer. What difference can I make? The difference I can make. And we only need to interrupt one part of this cycle to make that difference before it all falls apart. And the easiest, the most straightforward thing that we can do as a society is address that bit around suppression. And what that can look like, some of you are not going to like, but when we're having a hard day, instead of popping on Netflix and binge watching shows until we pass out on the couch and start drooling, maybe it looks like reluctantly picking up the phone, calling someone that we trust and saying, hey, today was really hard. It really hurt. I feel kind of alone right now, and I could really use someone to talk to about this. And then we commit the cardinal sin of masculinity, and we talk about our feelings. We talk about the things that we normally would never talk about, instead of pretending like we're fine. And it begins here with each and every one of you, with me, with us. It begins here so that the people in our lives can begin to unsuppress. They can begin to treat this like it's normal. It begins here so that that 10-year-old boy, he can do what he does best. And he can do as we do, not as we tell him to. It begins here so that we can look at every single dark statistic that I've given you here today and say, this is the difference I can make. And in the beginning, we spoke of a girl. It's time to bring her back into the story because there's something about emotions that's so important that we just haven't talked about yet. So she used to tell me that she loved me more than I would ever know. And I'm sad to say that she was right. I was so busy pushing away my emotions that I didn't have any room for hers, especially not her love. So I didn't get it. I didn't get it when she begged me not to leave. I didn't get it when she cried with her hands shaking because she didn't want to be alone. And despite all of that, she still fought with everything that she had to make sure that I survived. Now, I'm going to take a step back from this too, because I know how that sounds. And so for reassurances, she's doing great right now. And she's living a very different life. As part of that, she and I don't really talk anymore. So this next part goes out to her as much as it goes out to each and every one of you. I'm so sorry for who I was, for the damage that that caused. And I'm so grateful for everything that you did. Because now I finally get it. I get how sometimes emotions can feel weak and brittle. They can make us feel vulnerable, and sometimes they're the last thing that I want to do. But I also get that sometimes, from 1,000 miles away, they give us a second shot at life, one that we could have never earned. And so today, I'm going to leave you with an invitation. I'm inviting you to give that same gift to the people in your life that you love. That minor miracle, that baby aspirin. I'm inviting you today, for just a few moments, to stop thinking so much and just to allow yourself to feel. I'm inviting you to allow yourselves to be human again. Thank you.